Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. Hope everybody's having a pleasant week. It's Thursday. It's like Friday Eve. Don't you just love it when people say, "Hey, it's Thursday, it's Friday Eve"? I actually don't really care for that phrase. I just said it mostly to be sarcastic and comment then on how much I don't like hate it, but it's not really my favorite thing. It sort of falls in the same um, sort of bucket. I'm Spartacus. Tuna. It's your Twitch birthday. 2 years. Holy crap, man. And an unbroken 2 year streak. Tuna, thank you so much for the support, as always, my friend. It is greatly appreciated. And I hope that I hope that you're doing well, and that the universe pays you forward good things. Because Tuna's a good dude. I don't know if you all know this or not. I don't say that just because he subscribes to the channel. I would say that even if he didn't. Tuna's a pretty good dude. So, welcome everybody. As I was saying, I hope everybody's having a good week. It's been the first full week of classes for me. So we started halfway through the week last week, but we're still sort of getting into the groove of things. Students are still trying to figure out whether or not they care or if they want to be in class or not. Some of the ones that are in my classes are already kind of buying into the idea that it's okay to talk and we can have good discussions, and that's good. A couple of classes are still sort of trying to figure out whether or not I'm actually the person that I portray myself as. If you've seen me stream, this is the same way that I teach in my classroom. I'm very conversational. I tell goofy stories. I make ridiculous, offhanded, tangent kind of comment stuff. So you're pretty much getting Shane as a teacher in the classroom here on Twitch. What up, KP? Good to see you. So it's not that much different. I don't curse in class and I don't curse here on stream. That's the biggest, I would say, difference between like me in real life and me here on stream. I might be a bit more goofy and maybe a bit more sarcastic in real life. I try to be on my good behavior when I'm here on stream. Oh man, is the lurk command not working? Well, that's unfortunate. Let me try a shout out real quick. We'll just try to give David a shout out. I don't think he's in the room, but we'll see if the shout out works. Oh, it looks like the bot is broken. Well, that's fancy schmancy. So I sort of want to make either a meme or maybe some sort of yeah. The bot was just turned off. I didn't do that. I did not turn the bot off. It just decided to turn itself off. Ay, gavolta. Let's do the work and try it out. There we go. You're less likely to have one of our parents call your boss over something you said. That's probably true. I have had dealings with parents in college even. So it's not unheard of that I get contacted by parents. Not necessarily over content that I've discussed in class, but typically over grades. So that's something that I didn't expect. The bot realized the horror of sentience, right? What's up, Tad? We'll try the shout out command. There we go. Tad, go follow Tad Mazeltov, because he's a good dude too, and we like a lot of the same kind of stuff, and he also builds Gundam kits. So go give him a follow. I need to sneeze. My allergies have been kicking my butt for about the past week or so, and I've just had these like random sneezes that feel kind of like a thunderstorm in a split second. Um, it's just the way that it goes. But it's probably because the seasons down here are kind of schizophrenic. It was, you know, spring yesterday, and tomorrow it's going to be winter. And in between, we get like 8 hours of fall. So it's going to, like, it was in the 80s 2 days ago, and it's going to be in the 40s tomorrow. That's just the way that things work in the world. But let's get to some history, and we will hopefully give a go to all of this other stuff in the world. And for a little while, we can talk about how things were in the past and forget all the troubles of today. Unless somebody wants to talk about what's in the news. There's a lot of stuff in the news, which we can do whenever you all feel like it. But anyway, okay, so again, we started a new phase of history last week. So we are now in the lovely 9th century of the current era. So once again, this is the year 800 to the year 900. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Tuna, did you have anything specific that you wanted to ask about or talk about, or just, hey, here you go? Because there's a bunch of weird stuff. Alec Baldwin. He's going to get charged, or he has been charged with involuntary manslaughter. So there is a movie called Rust, and it's sort of a Western, and supposedly I don't know all of the ins and the outs of the actual police proceedings. I haven't read any police reports or anything like that from the situation, but what it looks like is somebody on the set, including the prop master, screwed up, and instead of loading a gun with blanks, actually loaded a gun with live ammunition. And Alec Baldwin was in either practicing a scene or filming a scene. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but shot towards the camera, because this was the way that the scene was supposed to be filmed, and hit the director and the cinematographer, I believe. The director survived, but the cinematographer passed away. And Baldwin has basically said that he had no knowledge of this and was unaware that the gun was actually loaded. So this is where the involuntary manslaughter thing comes in, because you can still get charged with involuntary manslaughter if you have been shown to be negligent to the point of causing the death. So Alec and the prop master and the armorer and the first assistant director have all been charged. Yep. I don't know where that's going to go. I mean, it'll end up in court. I'm sure Alec Baldwin will be able to hire a pretty high power attorney. The question is whether or not they're going to have 3 individual trials, or if they're going to try each of them individually. I'm sure Alec Baldwin is going to push for individual trials, or his lawyer is going to push for individual trials, so that he can be tried by himself and not sort of convicted in a big thing. Yeah, plea deal is probably something. Voluntary manslaughter is sort of the lowest tier of what we might call like murder charges, or homicide charges. I shouldn't say murder charges, because murder is its own bracket. So you have manslaughter and then murder on top of that. So I thought the assistant director pled guilty. I don't know. See, that I really haven't kept up too much with that. It sucks that somebody died. That the takeaway from this whole thing is somebody died, and that really sucks. I'm sort of a, how do I say this? there's this part in Lord of the Rings, right, where uh, Frodo is talking to Gandalf, and they're talking about Gollum, and Frodo goes, "Man, I wish Bilbo would have just killed Gollum. He totally deserves it." And Gandalf says that there are many who deserve death, but are you the one that's going to, be responsible for dealing it all out? And there are many who deserve life that end up dying, and are you going to be the one that basically defends all of them, or what's up with that? And I don't like that. If I was ever responsible for someone's death directly or indirectly, and I knew that, that would eat the crap out of me. I don't know how that's all going to play out. I suspect that it's going to be Baldwin's attorney is going to push for 3 separate trials, or at least 2 separate trials, so that Alec Baldwin can be tried individually, and then they're going to work really, really hard. And something like what Brass Windchimes here is saying, a 36-month probation and fine and community service, that kind of stuff is not outside of the veil of possibility. Baldwin's definitely large enough to pay a really big fine. That, of course, does not bring the deceased back to life, but in court systems that can sometimes assuage justice. But it's going to be a weird situation. I don't know how that's all going to play out. Tuna says, in my opinion, the first AD is definitely guilty. The armorer was criminally negligent. Alec is guilty as a producer, but not as an actor. Oh, that's an interesting question, or interesting point. I didn't know that he was a producer on the film. That might make him liable under the sort of the larger umbrella conversation of him being responsible for the movie overall. If you get handed a gun, it's your responsibility to know the status of said gun. I agree. I don't know, man. That's just really weird, right? Like, how do you know why do you even have live ammunition on the set of a movie in the first place? Why? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Somebody screwed up big time. So an executive producer, that's still probably going to get him on the hook, but typically executive producers are basically just like, I'm going to give a whole bunch of money and maybe give pointers here or there, and somebody else is going to do the actual work. Using a real weapon as a prop introduce the risk that is absent when using a fake weapon. Yeah, I'm with you, Meg. People were doing target practice for fun and the ammo got mixed. Yeah, so no, I didn't know that one, Green Herring. That is so much dumb. So much dumb. No. Okay, yeah. This is getting worse the more we talk about it. That's insane. If a professional tells you it's loaded with blanks and your job is actually to shoot blanks at people, it's hard to blame the actor all that much. Yeah, I can see that angle up. See, it's a messy gray area thing, right? Like, it's messy stuff. You would like to think that you can trust experts. You would like to think that, but at the end of the day, and well, I don't know. It'll all come out in the courts, and it'll all end up at trial. Or it might not end up at trial. I don't know. We might get some sort of plea deal like Brass Windchimes is saying, and we might not end up with a trial for Baldwin at all. Who knows? Somebody's going to go to jail for this, I suspect. How long they go, what type of jail they go to, and the penalty overall, that's the big question mark. But I suspect somebody's going to jail. Armorer claimed to not know there were live bullets on the set. AD grabbed the gun and handed it to Alec and told him it was safe to use. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's a complicated situation, and again, I clearly don't know as much of the details as you all do, so I'm probably not the best person to opine. I will always say I don't know, and this is definitely an I don't know kind of area. But it's interesting to talk about. Let me say hey to everybody. because we've seen some people kind of sneak in. Green Herring, hello. Brass Wind Chimes, how's it going? Welcome in. Magnificent, how's it going? Hope you're having a good one. I think that's everybody. The AD should not be handling weapons on set. Yeah, that's not really the AD's job. Okay, so we're talking about the 9th century, or we're talking about last year. One of the two. So in the 9th century, we talked about Japan last week, and we talked about sort of the early height of the Heian period in Japan, which is really a pretty cool period where things chill out and they have a lot of cultural advancement. The same can't really be said for Korea. Korea during the 9th century is not going to have the same level of what we might call success. Now, there's still going to be some cultural development. There's going to be some positives that come out of this. What's up, Uncle Bill? But overall, the situation isn't going to be so cut and dry or nearly as good. So we start off the century with two big kingdoms in Korea. And we have here in the blue the kingdom of Shilla. Now, once again, Shilla had been around for a long time. So the kingdom of Shilla is at this point half a millennia old. And its sort of traditional homeland was this kind of southeasterly corner down here. But over the course of the last century, previous, the 8th century, Shilla had conquered all of the Korean peninsula except for this chunk here in the north, and the northern chunk of Korea is controlled by a group called the Balai. Shilla equals South Korea. Well, if we look at that's a great question. So if we look at the Korean peninsula today and we show the modern borders, so here's the modern borders between South Korea and North Korea, right? So we can see those. And let's go back to our images. Right? It's not that far. It's not that different. Right? It's not really that different. Now, and I actually talked about this earlier in the week with the mods in the mod chat. That I hope that when we talk about this stuff, even if it's not necessarily your wheelhouse, right? Like not everybody's super big into Korean history. I can tell that just by looking at the viewer numbers for streams where I do Korean history. It's not super popular. But the stuff that's happening, even though this is happening, 1,100 years ago, it still is going to affect the way that the modern people think, right? And the separations between the kingdoms in Korea is not something that just happened at the end of the Korean War, right? What's going on, Mazari? How's it going? Hope you are having a good one. Welcome in. Feel free to talk, chat, do what your thing. Participate at whatever level you're comfortable. It's okay, Korean history. Wasn't popular in school either. Yeah, that's pretty clear. The Korean history doesn't get a lot of love in what we might call world civilization classes that we have here in the Western world. But let's talk a little bit about Shilla. So what's going on with them during this period of time? Well, overall, unfortunately, what we can point to is a very marked decline, right? History of North and South Korea. Yeah, so Mazari, the stream here is just history in general, and we do history in chronological order, and we sort of segment things out by centuries. So right now, for the next probably month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, we're going to be talking about the 9th century, which is the year 800 to 900. And we do things regionally. So last week we did Japan in the 9th century, and today we're doing Korea. And next week we'll do China, and then we'll do Tibet and Central Asia, and we'll do India and Southeast Asia. So you can kind of see how that goes. But when we get all the way around the globe and back around to the date line, we'll start doing the 10th century, and we'll pick up with Japan and do Korea and China and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so tonight, this particular period of time is actually called the North and South States period. We could put that here. Well, yeah, I could probably kick that down. North and South States period. Hello from the future. What's up, Raveland? Good to see you. And also, hey, Moose. Did the Koreans have cool armor like the samurai? They had some laminated armor, but that was really only going to be limited to just a few individual soldiers, particularly ones that were in like the really, really fancy stuff, like the Hwarang, who were the sort of elite soldiers. The Korean armor and stuff like that was not as elaborate as what you're thinking when you think samurai armor. I have a feeling that what you're thinking of when you think samurai armor is probably like stuff that Tom Cruise wore in The Last Samurai, right? Or if they, or maybe some picture that you've seen from somebody in, you know, the 1840s wearing their grandfather's armor or something like that. But let me bookmark, or sort of not bookmark, but make a connection here that when you're thinking samurai armor, that stuff hasn't really come around yet, especially the really elaborate multi-layer dun 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 dun. Azari, thank you so much for that follow, and welcome to the adventure. So the stuff that you're thinking about when you think samurai armor, like the big things with like the really big shoulder pads and the big breastplate and the helmet that kind of comes, you know, down over the shoulders and has the really big scary face mask, that stuff really isn't even being used in Japan during this period of time. That's probably about 200, maybe 250 years or so from where we're talking about right now, because that type of armor isn't really going to show up until around 1,500, maybe 1,100 or so of the current era. So the fact that the Koreans don't have it isn't necessarily a knock against them, because at this period of time, Japan doesn't have it either, right? You love history. It's a pity that we didn't teach it well. I agree, Mazzari. So I teach history and sociology for a living. At a college level. I've taught high school, I've taught university, I currently teach mostly introductory classes. And when I teach history, I do try to teach a true world history approach. In sociology, I just spent part of the day yesterday talking about this guy named Ibn Khaldun, who wrote sociology about 400 years before the Europeans figured it out. And the reason it didn't catch on in Europe was because of cultural bias and things like that. So like I try to teach a true global perspective history kind of stuff. This is why I kind of do all this stuff. And I don't really specialize. That's another thing that modern history professors tend to do, is they'll pick one thing and they'll just kind of go like all at it. Now that doesn't mean I don't have my favorites, right? I mean, I have my favorite stuff. I really like Persia. I really like Central Asia. I really like Rome. I like the Bronze Age a lot, you know. But, you know, I try to learn everything that I can, because it all fits together in certain ways. So to me, it makes sense. Now, you will learn English to learn history from me. Oh, well, if I ever say anything that is confusing, or if I need to repeat myself, please feel free to let me know. That's what I'm here for, right? So, in the Kingdom of Unified Shilla, what do we have going on? Unfortunately, a lot of fighting. And as an attempt to not go through all of the sort of individual little events, I'm going to try a little bit of a new approach with the new phase here to try to talk a little bit more about big scale things instead of getting down into this guy killed that guy. We'll still talk about the cool stuff, right? So don't feel like we're completely changing gears here. I just want to try to bring in more cultural stuff and try to bring in more of a broad picture other than just this guy killed that guy in a war, right? So what's happening internally? Well, inside of the Kingdom of Unified Shilla, there is a bit of a two sides of a coin situation. So on the culture side, this period is actually fairly active. They in the Kingdom of Unified Shilla are becoming much more involved with Buddhism. They had become so sort of important that they were sending people to China and influencing Chinese Buddhism. And China had Buddhism before Korea did. So now the fact that the Koreans from Shilla were sending people, especially monks and leaders, back into China to influence them was a big step forward, right? So they had built a lot of neat stuff that we talked about last time. So while Buddhism was going really well, even that wasn't going as well as it was. They didn't really build a lot of big temples or anything. There's not necessarily large works of architecture that come from this century. But even if we roll back to last time, so last century, they built a lot of stuff, big temples, some big pagodas, all kinds of really big, public works projects. We talked about these big grottos that have these great carvings in the walls and stuff like that. So they were even decline in that area. So this is partially because of the political struggle that's going on. So while Buddhism was big and growing, even the amount of stuff that they could do for it wasn't as much because there's so much fighting going on. And the fighting is not just between Korea and outside forces, though that is happening. It's also fighting inside of Korea. And this can be between members of the imperial family. So like one person that could be emperor fighting another. There's also the imperial family versus the nobility. During this period of time, the nobility are going to probably have a higher proportion of political power than they had previously because the emperors were just getting really weak. And just thematically speaking, if you've been around the stream, you know that when things get bad, you can start seeing these signs that things are going bad, right? When the reigns of emperors start shrinking really, really fast. So like in the year 839, inside of Korea, they had 3 emperors in 1 year. So one guy got killed, another guy got deposed, and then they got another guy that was the leader of the coup that deposed him. So this is all happening in like 1 year. There's a lot of fighting. And a lot of this stuff is actually attributed to people not doing stuff the right way religiously. Like you're not honoring your ancestors or you're not practicing the religion the right way. We do know that the imperial family still had a lot of money because we still see stuff. Well, that's the intro screen, you dum-dum. We still see stuff like this. This is a big tumulus. And specifically here, this is the tumulus of a king named Hyeongsong, who was an emperor around this time. So we're still getting big, cool burial things, right? But we're not really having the stability that Korea had been used to for the previous century. One neat little thing here. One of the emperor's name is Sinmu. And as a sort of a neat little anecdote that kind of gives you the understanding that they thought the instability wasn't just earthly, that there was some sort of weird spiritual aspect to the instability. Sinmu the story goes like this: that he was asleep in bed, and he dreamed that a vengeful ghost of one of the people that he had killed caught him in the dream and shot him in the chest with an arrow. And when the arrow hit him, Senmu woke up, and according to the history, he had the wound in his chest. And he basically lived just long enough to tell everybody that he had been slain by a vengeful ghost with an arrow in his dreams, right? So there's a lot of instability, but there's also this really interesting focus on religious aspects of life. So it's kind of a juxtaposition between the two, right? During this period of time, there is a lot of rebellion. The nobility, especially, will stop paying taxes and come up in rebellion. Imperial family members that had been kicked out of power will move to different parts of the country, raise up an army, and then try to attack in a coup. Many of those coups are successful. By the time you get to the 850s during this period, there is a lot of famine. There was just so much disruption that the food didn't get delivered the right way, and with all of the wars that were being fought, the population was dropping due to people dying in the war. So by the time you get to the late 50s and into the 60s, there were some severe famine level issues inside of Korea. Now, we do see, though, that the imperial family was still trying to be in charge and still trying to fix some stuff. So, we have records of one of the emperors named Hyeonan who tried to do some big scale irrigation stuff using public funding. So he would, we're going to hire a whole bunch of people. We're going to get them to dig irrigation things. This is going to open up more land. With more land, we can grow more crops. Hopefully, we'll eliminate this famine situation. So it's not like the imperial family had nothing going on and that there wasn't any sort of centralized power. It's just that the power is fractioning, right? It's falling apart. One of the only what we might call big and successful emperors during this time is a guy named Hyongduk. I spelled that wrong. It's Heou, not Heo. It's Heu. Hyongduk. This guy rules from 826 to 836. He is probably the last, what we might call, really successful emperor of the unified Shilla kingdom. And we've got some good stuff on him. So again, Buddhism is going to be pretty big. He's going to promote that as much as he's able to. He's also going to do a lot to sort of try to curtail a lot of the excessive spending, right? He's going to go about this in a very odd way. He's going to pass a lot of legislation on the types of clothes that people can wear. It's 8:35 a.m. You're sitting here trying to learn English and history in a language you don't know. Bipolar, of course, is a fun thing. I tip my hat. Learning different languages is difficult, and I know that from learning different languages. So one of the things that Hyungduk does with this clothing law set is that he cuts down on flashy clothes. You are not supposed to wear or buy really, really expensive clothing. You're not supposed to show off with clothes. You're supposed to use that money for other things that are better. And he even starts trying to pass things like what types of clothes you can wear. Like he almost tries to pass laws that are going to standardize clothes, sort of like what you might consider a communist thing, where all men wear this and all women wear that. It doesn't quite get that far, but there are some guidelines. Did he have a fashion police? No, he didn't. But if you were, walking around in public, everybody could see that you were wearing all this gaudy stuff, and he could You could then be arrested for it. So I guess in that situation, you could call them the fashion police. He also cut down on the ability of people to wear gold and silver jewelry. Now, this actually may have had a political angle on it. So, wearing gold and silver jewelry was reserved only for the imperial family. So, if you were in the nobility, but you weren't in the imperial family, you stay classy, Sheila, right? You couldn't wear gold or silver jewelry, and you weren't supposed to have gold and silver adornments on your clothes, right? So you couldn't have gold buttons, right? Or a silver chain, that kind of stuff to, like maybe hold whatever you would carry on your sword or something like that. In another 60 years, maybe you'll be good enough at your first language to start a second. Uncle Bill, your breadth of knowledge always impresses me. For those of you that don't know, Uncle Bill here is one of the founding members of the Knowledge Fellowship, and I'm on the Knowledge Fellowship Discord, and it's always amazing to see the amount of conversation that Uncle Bill can get into on a specifically technical level that's not just relegated to one field. It can be anything, because Uncle Bill is just a giant sponge of knowledge, and it's really impressive. I think that you have far mastered English. It's really, really neat to see. So, why was this potentially political? So there are some scholars that say that the reason Hyungduk did this is to sort of create a visual distance between the emperor and everybody else. So if you go to court and all of the nobility are wearing muted colors and wearing conservative cut clothes, but the emperor is wearing whatever he wants to and decked out in, yeah, exactly, he wanted to be the best looking dude in the room. But this has like actual political ramifications, because you just start seeing the emperor as different. Now, this can have negative repercussions, because this can also be like, look at that pompous guy sitting up there with all the jewelry on. But it could also create some social distance between you and the nobility. There are some people that are economically based historians that say that this was an attempt at freeing up gold and silver into the economy as a way to eliminate hoarding of wealth, because with famine, of course, comes economic hardship. So having a lot more liquid capital moving around in the economy would have positive influences on stuff and help drive down a lot of the economic issues. If you can hoard up lots of money, you can pay really exorbitant fees for stuff, and you can hoard things like food during a famine. But if you are spending your money and everybody is being more calm, that is going to free up stuff for economic movement, right? So there are a lot of theories as to why exactly he did this. We really don't know for sure. But he's probably the last big, what we could call successful ruler of unified Shilla. And that's saying something, because, we've had such great rulers in this region in the past. Here is his tomb. It's one of the more impressive of all of the tumuli. Maybe you can save up enough during a pandemic to buy a social media company, right? Oh, sad face. No deep draft freighter transports. See, that's the kind of stuff that belies your point that you don't have deep knowledge. These references to deep draft freighter transports, right? So anyway, you've got this really cool altar here in front of his larger tumulus. Of course, these would have had wooden posts that would have acted as a barrier around the tumulus itself. So you get this really cool tumulus here for our buddy Hyungduk. This is right outside of the old capital, which is at this place called Gyeongju in the northeastern corner. So the capital was like right about here at Gyeonggi, right there, or right thereabouts. So it doesn't stay that way though. One more good thing. Unified Shilla starts trading a lot more with both China and Japan, but especially with Japan. The Japanese stability during the Heian period was going to give them a lot of positive motion, economically speaking. And when things were stable in Japan, there was a lot of trade between Shilla and Japan because Shilla was, again, having all these problems, and it was beneficial for them to have this economic push. And they could also bring in things like food from China. So this is one of the ways that the imperial family held on for as long as they did, was this big increase with trade, right? But it doesn't last. We're going to get all the way until the 880s, and we're going to run into a ruler named, I spelled that wrong. I'm so bad at Korean. Jinseong. Jinseong was a female ruler, and this by itself tells us that things had changed fairly significantly. We don't have, historically speaking, a lot of women heads of state in ancient Korea. This is only the third time it had happened since Shilla had been a kingdom, like we said, for 500 plus years. So it was not very common. Jinseong came to the throne because of this instability. All of the male family members around her had been either killed or exiled or rendered unable to take the throne. When she took over in 887, the country was in just horrific shape. And this isn't her fault, right? Again, we had a century of internal fighting, famine, bad politics. So while culturally things are going okay, just everything else was not going so great. The central authority of the imperial clan had eroded a lot, and she really didn't have any money. That was one of the biggest things. Remember, I mentioned that the nobility were doing a lot of rebellion. One of the very common ways that the nobles tried to stick it to the emperors was they just refused to pay taxes. And of course, when the nobles aren't paying taxes, that depletes what the emperors can do. And if we remember, one of the few things that was sort of acting as a glue to kind of hold the country together were these imperial projects. Like we're going to build some irrigation stuff, or we're going to open some new trade. But when the emperor doesn't have any money, what do you do with that, right? So there's going to be a series of really big rebellions. And by the time we get to 897, so just 10 years after Jinseong took over, things are not going to look the same. So let's check out a map here. You can see that we've split, and the kingdom of unified Shilla has broken into thirds. So this region here in the north becomes Taebong, and later on this will be referred to as later Goguryeo. I'm assuming these nobles represent most, if not all, of the revenue base. That is correct, Uncle Bill. So the imperial clan had control over international trade, but it was still very much reliant on individual nobles to pay taxes from their provincial produce benefits, right? So if you're a farming community, you're going to pay so much either in cash or in kind from farming goods. If you're a fishing community, or if you're a mining community, the provincial system worked very similar to what you might be familiar with like a high feudal situation, right? So the emperor is going to have their own materials and their own income, but typically speaking, that's not going to be enough to run the entire country. That's going to be enough to sort of keep things together. If nobody pays taxes, it's really hard to run a country. What's up, JMR? How's it going? So again, we have a breakaway country, a new country here, Taebong, here in the central part of the peninsula. Down here, we have a resurgent Baekje. So Pekja comes back. This is one of the kingdoms that had been around during the Three Kingdoms period, which lasted for centuries. They break back away, and once again, Shilla gets more or less reduced to kind of their old traditional territory down here in the southeast. And I mean, they still have their capital, but they lose what used to be other countries. I'm doing pretty well. Pekja's back, all right. Pekja's back, all right. Yep. So while Jinseong does end up passing the throne on to the same imperial family, the kingdom that she's ruling and her descendants are ruling is not the same kingdom. Unified Shilla at this point is no more. So we have to turn our attention to the other kingdom, which is Balai. And we'll get rid of Jinseong. Okay, so once again, to remind everybody, this big purple chunk up here is the kingdom of Balai. And it got its start in the last century, about the middle part of the 8th century. This is going to sort of accumulate itself together from several different smaller kingdoms and different people groups. Once again, the kingdom of Balai was not a unified ethnic group, whereas the kingdom of Shilla were, I mean, clearly no country is going to be 100% ethnically the same, but the vast majority of people in the kingdom of Shilla were Koreans. Balai is not. They are a lot of different people groups. You've got some steppe nomadic groups in, you've got some Korean people in, you've got some people that are descended from Han Chinese that have come over, you've got some Turkish people that have come over. Sounds Korean. What's up tonight? How's it going, Junk? We're doing Koreans. We're doing the two kingdoms of Korea during this period of time, and then we'll talk about northern Asia, specifically the Uighur Khaganate, which we'll discuss at the end of the stream. Good to see you, though. That is a lot of land. It's quite a big one. And so Puerto Rican. I don't know if anybody from Puerto Rico had managed to make it over to Balai, but perhaps. Interestingly enough, so this is a bit of a joke that that JMR just made, but this brings me to something that's a bit of one of my pet projects, and I posted some. Well, no, I didn't post about it. I was going to post about it, but somebody had already posted about it. There were some genetic results that were published last week that showed conclusively genetic proof that the people that migrated over into North America from Asia had subsequent reverse migrations. So the big group moved over here into North America, but at various times throughout history, there were populations of people from North America that went back over into Asia. Potentially as recent ago as 1,000 years ago. So this is not like super duper distant past. This is about this time. So I know that JMR was joking there, but we can't necessarily directly deny that somebody from the Americas, perhaps even Puerto Rico, made his or her way over to Balai. Now, I know that's the possibilities of that are astronomically small, and this is mostly just a gag. But it might be possible. It might be possible. They said, daggum, Canada's cold. I'm going back to China. Well, I mean, they did have to go through Russia to get there, right? So this is the Kamchatka Peninsula, which is pretty cold, right? We might have had some taínos. I don't know if we can definitely say no for certain. I don't think so. I would bet against it. But there is maybe a 1 in a billion chance. Very, very small, right? But maybe. Interesting stuff. I really like human migration. That's one of my areas of interest. I've looked a lot into that. I have spent a lot of time reading about stuff like that. Chance is low, but never zero, right? Low, but never zero. Right. So, Balai. Again, they were sitting right up here in the northern part of the Korean Peninsula. These people had been responsible for destroying one of the three kingdoms of Korea, and that was Goguryeo, the last little part. They also took some land from China. It's like being killed by a duck. Yeah, never a 0% chance. Now, the difference between the two here is that the kingdom of Balai was much more exposed, right, to all of this other stuff going on over here. So, Shilla, sitting down here in the peninsula, was somewhat sheltered from all of the other Asian politics. And there was a lot of stuff going on over in here. There were multiple groups of people moving around. There was the Uighur Khaganate, which sat right here, which is a big old chunk of territory. There were people over here called the Moe. There were Khitan people that were sitting right here, and we'll look at a picture of some of their people in just a second. But Balai is exposed. They are right out on the front lines of all of this stuff. If anybody wants to move into this area, they're probably not going to bother Shilla. They're just going to mess with Balai. So that's kind of a tough place to be, right? There's another problem with us talking about Balai, and that is we don't have any of their histories. All of the stuff that we know about Balai comes from archaeological evidence that we've dug up from the area and external sources that wrote about them in passing, right? So we've got some stuff from Shilla that talk about them, some stuff from China that talk about them. We don't have any of their own history. And as we all know, if we don't have history from their perspective, their history is going to be potentially biased against them or minimize them or maybe even inflate them. If the Chinese were trying to make a big, bad, angry army up in the north that they needed to rally together to go fight, they might have overinflated Balhai's numbers of troops, right? So we have to be very careful about what we believe about this stuff. But generally speaking, Balai is doing much better than Shilla. Even with these constant sort of external threats, they're still doing better than Shilla was. They're going to have a lot of the kind of new country problems, right? So again, they were just founded less than a century ago, back in the 8th century, and they're having things like, we're trying to establish a stable ruling dynasty, or we're trying to figure out how to organize our provinces. Do we need lots of provinces, or do we need a few big ones? Who gets to rule the provinces? So they're kind of having growing pains, which is going to cause some instability, and they are going to have some rulers that end up with fairly short spans of rule, but not as small as the ones from Shilla. So Shilla was having emperors that made it 6 months, or 2 years, or 1 year. The ruler spans in Balai are going to typically be, you're like 7, 8 years, 5, 6 years, which is, it's not what you might see in other countries, but it was not as bad as it was in Shilla. So they're still kind of shaky. They're getting used to doing things, but they're not like all out powerful. But they are having the same kind of cultural boom here. Specifically, again, with Buddhism. So we start seeing pieces of artwork like this pop up in Balai. So this is a big stela, and you can see here we've got the Buddha, and we've got some inscriptions down here that talk about the ruler and how cool they are. And you start seeing individual artistic styles. So when we look at this, I mean, you can clearly tell that this is Buddha being surrounded by some of the local deities, but it's not exactly what you might see in China, right? Their dragons up here look a little bit different. Their Buddha looks a little bit different. Their lions or Fudog, whichever one you want to call them, look a little bit different. Their warriors look a little bit different. So they've kind of got their own flavor. And again, this comes from the fact that they had a lot of different groups of people that lived, in their country, right? Lots of different individual people groups, lots of influences from the outside. So it's an interesting thing to think about. So what else do we have going on with them? Well, they've got lots of trade kicking up because they're tapping into, so they're out on the border with all of these countries in Asia, right? But that also means, yeah, Gundam intermission. I was looking at Gundam stuff before I came on stream, and I forgot to minimize all of that. So one of the things that they get from being on the border with all of these people and in contact with all of these people is that they get to trade with all of these people, right? So there are benefits to being kind of out there. Whereas Shilla had to do all of its trade by sea, Balai can trade on land with lots of different people from all over the place. They have direct borders with China, the Uyghurs, the Moe, the Khitans, so they've got some money to be made there. But it's not all sunny in Philadelphia, right? I should have said that funny, but Son is one of their kings, and he's kind of like the last really obviously big good king of Balhai. He rules from 818 to 830. And he does a lot of good stuff. So he's going to be the one that really stabilizes the economy. So again, he's in this kind of early phase, but he stabilizes the economy, and he does that by injecting a whole bunch of new trade. He's also going to be the one that sort of figures out the provincial structure. It's already 8:58 though, so he's out. Well, it's 8:18 at this point when he takes over. I know that it's 8:58 where you are. Ha ha ha. But anyway, so he's going to be the one that figures out how to do the provincial structure, and he's going to do this with a big series of political reforms and especially military reforms. So one of the things that was a problem with these provinces was you don't want your provinces to be too big, because if you have really big provinces, then an individual provincial governor might be a potential threat to the king or the emperor, right? But if you have too many small ones, they're all going to skim, right? This is the sort of hidden truth of feudalism. Everybody skims on their taxes. If the king says, I want $10, the nobles are going to go to their people and say, the king demands $12. And they're going to put that other $2 in their pocket. Everybody skims, right? So if you have tons of little provinces, you're going to end up hitting a diminishing return on your taxes, right? So there's sort of a happy medium where, you know, you're actually getting money paid to you, but you're not losing money in the long run from it. But one of the things that he does to enforce this provincial system is reforms the military, right? How do you make the nobles pay the taxes? If the nobles think that they can get away with it, or if the nobles think that they can maybe hide a bunch of money and then rebel, you've got to have something to sort of break out when they go crazy, right? You've got to have a standardized, stable military that is loyal to the emperor, that is part of the centralized power structure. And he does this, and he's actually going to be quite successful. There's a point where he actually starts invading Shilla because he thinks, you know, maybe I can take them. Maybe I can conquer Shilla. And he tries pretty hard, and he actually gets a pretty decent go of things, but Shilla then manages to push him back out. Hold on just a second. So all right. Anyway, this is in response. One of the things that Shilla does for him is, or against him, is that one of these big building projects kicks in where he decides to, or so he invades, and then Shilla ends up building this big wall as a way to try to keep him out. And this is a big old chunk of wall. It's like 300 miles long to try to keep him out of invading. And it's a big messy thing. So they do end up pushing him out. But he's not done with the expansion stuff. He decides that he wants to go conquer some other people. And he does that going up to the sort of northeastern region, right around up here. The Greatish Wall of Baal. Yeah, so pretty much. But this would be built by Shilla. So this is the Great-ish Wall of Shilla. So he's going to expand into the north and to the east and take on the Moe people. And he's going to conquer a big chunk of this region up in the north and the east. And he's going to end up with territory that's really big, and it looks like this. He really expands up here to the north and the east. So here you see the Heshui Moe. There was another group of Moe that lived right here, and he takes them out and adds them to his territory. So now he's got a big old chunk of this coastline, substantially larger than it was when he started. So he's doing pretty well for himself. But again, this is kind of the last big moment for Balai under King Sun, because by the time you get to the end of his reign, stuff starts not going as great for the kingdom. Specifically, these external peoples, these people from the outside, are going to really, really start pushing really hard to try to get into his territory. When he expands really big, he puts a big old target on his back. That's one of the things that happens, and it's unfortunate for him. I guess it's not so unfortunate for the Mohe, who maybe get some vengeance out of this situation. But especially a group of people called the Khitans. The Khitan people. They were semi-nomadic, and they lived right around in here. And they were fairly numerous, but they were your good old-fashioned semi-nomadic people that were fond of horses and fought on horseback and lived out in the plains and hunted and did stuff like that and herded horses and stuff. So these people are also going to be, through history, related to, like what Tuna says, the Mongols. So now the Mongols are going to be a couple hundred years after what we're talking about right now. But the Khitan people are going to have ties to the Mongols through history. And if we want to look at a picture, we actually have this silk screen that comes out of China, either from the 9th century or maybe the 10th century. But we see a group of Khitan hunters, and they have gone out to the plains, and they are hunting with falcons, which you can see here on their arms. And I liked this picture particularly because it also kind of brings back one of our favorite themes of adventures in history when we talk about nomadic plains people, and that is the small, chunky horses. These people are rather large, and their horses are kind of small and chunky. So there's some Khitan people for you. Indeed, chunky horse. So the Khitan people are really going to be interested in getting into Balai. And the rulers after King Son are going to have differing luck in keeping them out. So Balai is going to survive this century, but doesn't make it too far into the next one. I'll give you a little bit of a preface because it's worth mentioning. The wars with the Khitans especially are going to be increasingly damaging to the central structure of the Kingdom of Balai. And by 907, so just 7 years after the material that we're talking about tonight, their kingdom collapses to these outside invaders. This is also going to be beneficial for China and be beneficial for other kingdoms in Korea that are going to develop, especially a new kingdom that is going to be called Goryeo, which is where we get Korea from. So that's going to happen next century. As a little bit of a preface, I know sometimes I leave everybody hanging on the edge, but I want to kind of do some work to try to get people excited about some of the areas of history that we might not always talk about. So stuff like this in Central Asia and Southeast Asia and stuff of that nature, that's not necessarily what you get on the bus tour history. I'll give you a little bit of a primer to get you excited for the next time that we do this. Now, it'll be a while, right? Because we'll go all the way through history and all these different stuff. So the tax collector is always the black hat. Pretty much, right? Okay, so there we go. Now, Balai has its moment. It does its thing. It does survive, unlike the unified kingdom of Shilla. Speaking of taxes, yeah, it's tax time. Oh, contributions to the All Opinion Hat stream. How are we doing on that community challenge, by the way? I don't even know where we are. We're almost halfway there. You all have donated 425,770 viewer points. 427,770 points to the all viewer request, or sorry, all opinion hat viewer request stream. I get a little bit more anxious about that every time I think about it. Just to be honest. I'm going to disable clipping. I'm going to not publish that VOD, and I'm going to put on... No, we're not saving the VOD for that one. And I'm going to put on the warning mature content alert just for that stream. And I might even put not your typical history stream as a reminder. Yeah. Kind of worried. But, you know, why didn't you go away? I told you to go away. There we go. All right, now. So that's what's going on in the Korean Peninsula. Interesting stuff in the Korean Peninsula. But they are not the only people in Asia that we're going to talk about tonight. Because, again, we're going to talk about this northern region of Asia, and specifically our friends, the Uighurs, who we've been talking about for a couple hundred years now. And that brings us to our title, Leave It to Uighur, right? It's really hard to come up with rhymes for Korean names, right? Like Hyungduk or Jinseong. It doesn't really rhyme easily with English words. I had a pretty rough time of coming up with a title for tonight. But I think Leave It to Uighur's okay. I think that one's got enough of punching power that it's not going to go down just as a chump thing. But I recognize it's probably not the best of all titles that I've ever made. So let's talk about the Uighurs. As a reminder, or maybe you haven't been around, the Uighurs were a Turkic group that was a dominant power here in northern Asia. And they had been thorns in the side of both the Koreans and the Chinese and the Tibetans, who have their own empire here in Central Asia. We'll talk about them in a couple of streams. Well, we'll talk about them a little bit tonight, but we'll also talk about them a little bit tomorrow. We will have a stream on them in a couple of weeks, specifically. So if we look at the territory controlled by the Uyghur Khaganate, we are looking at this. So why do we call it a Khaganate or a Khaganate? Well, the leader of the Turkic tribes at that point was called Kagan. That was their title. So you should change your voice and hide in the shadows. Yeah, do like a robot voice. Oh man, that's actually a pretty funny idea. I don't know who you're talking about. Oh, that would be delightful. With a really bad backlight. Let me do this because I forgot to when you came in. If you are not already following my buddy JMR Killer here, you got to go give this guy a follow. He is a really funny guy. He does model building and not just Gundam models, but also Lego stuff. He's done some Pokemon models. He's done some One Piece stuff. Just general builder, and also plays games. It's a good streamer. You need to go hang out with JMR and just goof off, right? Have a good time. Should we ask John Cena about the Uyghur? No, we shouldn't ask. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Yes, we should ask John Cena about the Uyghur because his specific issue was he called Taiwan a country and then posted an apology video in Mandarin to apologize to China for calling Taiwan a country. I would love to hear his take on the Uyghurs because the modern day Uyghurs are being systematically and institutionally destroyed by the Chinese government through forced work camps, detention camps, and just outright murder. They're ethnically cleansing their north and western provinces of Uyghur peoples. And I don't know why the world isn't calling this a genocide and trying to do something about it. Oh, I do. It's because China produces a whole bunch of really cheap stuff and everybody wants their money, right? Everybody wants Chinese stuff because it sells for cheap and China's got a massive market that they use to buy stuff from other countries and everybody wants their money. And money just kind of is a bigger deal than people's lives to a lot of people. And that I'm on a soapbox now. I should probably get on with it. None of that is factually inaccurate, by the way. That wasn't necessarily an opinion. The way I was delivering it was rather opinionated, but all of that stuff is backed up by fact. That wasn't me just running my mouth off. Anyway, here was the Uyghur Khaganate, right? This big old chunk of territory was controlled by the Uyghurs at the time. And they had been in control of this region since they took over the eastern Turkic Khaganate, the second Turkic Khaganate that was run before them by the Go-Turks. That was in the last century as well. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. Nixolotl, thank you so much for being Spartacus. And thank you for the emote again. Nixolotl is in the house. And you should go give Nixa a follow for all of your 3D / 2.5D / VTuber creation and art needs. If you're doing VTube stream, you should check out Nixolotl stuff. You might do some commission kind of stuff. I don't know. You might convince Nixolotl to go on as I don't know. I don't want to volunteer Nixolotl for stuff that Nixolotl doesn't want to do. So maybe I should shut up. You should go follow Nixolotl because it's a good time hanging out over there. Anyway, Uyghurs, cool stuff. What's going on with them? They're in sort of okay shape during this period of time. They're doing okay. They've got some instability because of their internal politics, but externally they're doing pretty well. So inside, anytime you have these semi-nomadic people trying to run an organized / centralized empire, there's always going to be internal politics. Part of this comes from the way that they traditionally held power in the first place. That being, typically speaking, the tribal chieftains would make a deal with one person, right? So, like, if I was a tribal chieftain and you all were other tribal chieftains, and I ran around and made this big alliance, and I got all of you to ally behind me, well, you would make that vow to me. Now, if I died and I had a son, you didn't make a promise to my son. You made a promise to me. So some people might go, oh, okay, I think that guy did all right. Maybe his kid will do okay. I'll sort of re-up the promise. But other chieftains didn't have to. Like, you weren't sort of held under compulsion to just automatically give your authority to the next person in line. And that does cause some internal disputes, right? Where I made a promise to your father, not you. And you have some challenges to the dynastic succession. You have some issues with, just people not wanting to be part of the larger empire, go off on their own. I can't imagine all this culture throughout China that had been lost because of the communist government. Yeah, the Cultural Revolution was a rough period of time in the 60s. It literally rewrote Chinese history to try to make everything look Han Chinese. It did. So it's a mess. Anyway, so you've got some sort of natural issues, but on the outside, things are going pretty well. They had kind of forced normalization between China and the Uyghurs, the Uyghur Khaganate. That wasn't always a comfortable relationship, but China during this period of time was not doing very well, and they actually needed some allies. And at various points in time, they asked the Uyghurs to come in and help them with stuff, especially to put down rebellions in the northern part of China. So this doesn't mean that they were perfectly friends. There were still some times where you'd have border skirmishes, especially when there were dynastic issues and the centralized power of the Uyghur Khaganate wasn't necessarily able to stop everybody. You'd get some chieftains that were like, you know what we should do? We should go down into China and raid a few cities. And they're like, hey, that sounds like a great long weekend, road trip with the bros. Let's go raid northern China. Yeah, they're kind of frenemies. They recognize that they're both unable to eliminate the other one, so they figure they might as well at least try to get along. Not always the best. But we do get an interesting figure in the name of Kagan Hu. So this guy's name is actually Hu. What's up, Viscera? How's it going? I'm doing okay. It's been a pretty... Well, I'll say this. Classes have gone pretty well. I've had a lot of work, just like, kind of clerical work, and I haven't slept very well this week. I've been having really, really freaky dreams for like the last 3 nights in a row, like dreams that would wake me up. And when I wake up in the middle of the night, it always takes me a while to go back to sleep. So I could use a nap, but tomorrow's Friday, so I'm gonna make it through tomorrow, and then I'll sleep late on Saturday morning, and we'll be okay, right? Hope things are going well in your world. So Kagan Hu. Kagan Hu is going to rule from 833 to 839, which isn't really a long time. But he does something really interesting here. He wanted to sort of bury the hatchet with China. And he decides that if he could formally make peace with China, and maybe even like marry into the Chinese royal family, that would offer him and his lineage a lot of authority, right? If he could get the Chinese government to recognize him and his family as the official rulers of the empire, that's a big political plus. The thing is, how do you make peace with China? Because they don't like you, right? There's some really good politics that goes on here. He sends down this big embassy to China, and he says all the right words, and he hits them at the right time. So again, this is in the 830s, because things in China weren't going so great. And again, they needed some help. So he sort of showed up right at that magic overlapping moment of, you're a good ruler that knows what they're doing, that is capable, and you're asking for something from somebody who really needs your help. And even if they don't necessarily like you, they're in a position where they kind of want to help you. But he makes peace with China. And I'm not talking about like we're going to shake hands, but like, no, like we're going to open embassies in each other's countries, right? Big deal. Big deal. But the people that were inside of the Khaganate do not like this at all. Especially all of those people around the fringe that were like, when this guy dies, we'll just kill his son and take over. They don't like the fact that he is now officially in charge. And what do? Well, you can't let him sit there, because the longer that he sits there, the more he's going to be entrenched. And the more that the Chinese are going to deal with him and his family and his administration, and the more your individual administrations are going to start losing power. So what do? You got to kick him out and you got to kill him. So there's a big coup that gets launched. You smell an assassination coming up. You are correct. You are correct, Junk Collector. They assassinate him. They chop his head off. So Kagan Hu goes away, and he gets killed. Now, assassin, Nick Slottle with the Lightning Assassin Command. When this happens, chaos falls. Like, it's crazy, because everybody's now sort of in play. Do it. Execute Order 66, right? So the faction that had killed Kagan Hu put a puppet on the throne, but Kagan Hu's family and a lot of the generals that supported him are going to escape. They're going to get out, and they're going to... What's up, Obi-Wan Kenobi? You're my only hope. Welcome in. I see that your first time chatting. Welcome into the chat. Hope you're having a good one. This is Adventures in History. I'm Shane. Feel free to participate at whatever level that you feel most comfortable with. We're really laid back. We're giant, nerds, that kind of stuff. Clearly, we like Star Wars. I grew up watching Star Wars. Pretty much on loop during the summers, right? I watched those movies so much that I memorized them all. Like, I even know the Huttese in the background, like, Quachuba Blinky. Stuff like that, right? Dewana Wanga. Dewana Wanga. That kind of stuff. I'm that big of a nerd. Anyway, so... right? The supporters of Kagan Hu's family are going to escape the capital, and they're going to get out to another group, because they don't necessarily trust any of the other Uighur groups. So who are they going to go to? Well, they go to another group called the Kyrgyz. And you're like, is that a word? Well, it's not quite, because it's got another Y in it. The Kyrgyz. And you're like, who? And I'm like, the Kyrgyz, right? You guys don't know where Kyrgyzstan is? If we zoom in here, we can go to Kyrgyzstan, the homeland of the Kyrgyz, right? Right there. It bordered the Uighur territory. They were broadly in this region, right? So the generals that supported Kagan Hu go over to the Kyrgyz, and they go, look, dudes, here's the thing. By the way, they're both sort of Turkic people. They're not completely separate across the board. There's enough differences that they have ethnic differences. and there are enough differences that they have genetic differences, but they're similar. It's not like running to somebody that has nothing in common with you, right? Yeah, it's right next to Tajikistan, exactly. So they go over to the Kyrgyz and they say, look, there's a puppet on the throne of the Uyghur Khaganate, and we would like for your help, or we're asking for your help to go over and get rid of the coup that killed the last emperor, or the last Khagan. Are you interested? And the Kyrgyz are like, yeah, we're interested in that. What's the deal? And they're like, well, if you put us back in charge, you put the Kagan Hu family back in charge, we'll share some territory with you, we'll trade with you, we'll treat you nicely, you'll kind of be like our buddies, stuff like that. And the Kyrgyz are like, oh, well, that doesn't sound bad. So the Kyrgyz show up, and when they get there, they realize how much chaos is going on, because when the emperor, when the Kagan got killed, all of the promises that were made to the Kagan, again, they just dissolved. So it's sort of a free-for-all. And the guy that was the puppet is this guy named Kakan Kasar. And he wasn't able to do anything because he wasn't really in charge in the first place. These people that launched the coup were supposed to be in charge, but they weren't really able to even handle their own territory. So the Kyrgyz, when they show up, they're like, we could just kill everybody and take over. And the generals that were supporting Kagan Hu's family, they were like, but you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to put us back in charge, right? And they're like, no, I think we're just going to burn everything and kill everybody. So they burned the capital. The capital is this place called Ordu Balik. So they burned the capital. They caught Kagan Kasar, and they killed him. And then in the matter of just 2 more years, the Kyrgyz had completely overrun the Uyghur Khaganate. And this is going to collapse the entire country, and everything just shatters. So what happens to the Uyghurs? Well, some of them go down into China. If you're wondering how Uyghurs got into what is modern-day China, this is part of the territory right here. They moved into the northern part of China. China did not like the fact that they were coming in, by the way, but the central dynasty at the time was the Tang dynasty. They weren't powerful enough to stop them. There were some that moved over into a new state run by the Kyrgyz. So we have a new dynasty that's going to pop up here that's ruling the area. And China's actually going to try a little bit to fight against them, or try to take some of this territory. They're not really successful. But the Uyghur Khaganate collapses, and it's never to be seen again. So for about 200 years or so, a little bit more, the Uyghurs had themselves a good run of stuff. And from that point forward, they're not really ever going to be completely independent again. They're always going to, I mean, there might be pockets of them that are sort of autonomous, but typically speaking, they're going to be part of some other larger territory, because the population kind of, shatters and spreads out after the collapse of their government. So, but that brings us to the end. I got one more thing. I've got a pic. Nope, that's the map. Here, this is a picture of a Uyghur noble from around this time. So again, they are a Turkic people. I don't like saying that they're Turkish, because Turkish implies that they're directly related to the people that live in Turkey today. And they're ethnically related through time, but they're not exactly the same. So I say Turkic. So Turk. They're like Turkic. They're of Turkish. They're Turks. Word. Gosh, I can't say things. Why say many word when few word work good, right? So this is it's just described as a prince of the Uyghurs. So we don't know if this is maybe one of their heads of state or just one of their nobility. But it's a pretty cool picture. You can get an idea of the neat little hats that they wore. But it is a nice beard. It's very well trimmed, very well kept. So there we go. So that's the stream for the night. I mean, well, that's the stuff that I prepared. So if you all have any questions, or if there's anything that you all wanted to ask, or points that you wanted to redeem, or anything like that, you would be welcome to do so. And I'd be happy to answer whatever I'm able to. So what you got? You got anything else? Tuna's like, what's in the news again? We can do that. You got anything else you want to talk about specifically? I pick. Let's talk about Uyghurs are not native to Xinjiang. Okay, so let's look at the provincial borders here. Okay, so if we look at, are they going to show me? Okay, so it's hard to get this all on the map, but Xinjiang province of China is this big thing right here, and it starts up here, and it runs all of this and down into here. I don't know how well you all can see the gray line, but basically it's this whole region right here. This is Xinjiang province. This is where a lot of the ethnic cleansing is happening right now. So if we go back to the Uyghur territory, you can see where the Uyghurs originated right here, and they spread the territory all the way out this way. So if we overlap this region with this region, we can see that there is a significant amount of overlap, mostly right around in this area, right? So right up here, right? So they are native to the region, but they weren't just there. The point that I was trying to make is when this larger area of politic fractured, they sort of spread out all over the place. So they ended up over here and some over here and kind of, diasporate out. But this native region right here is where they were first sort of originating. So are they the original inhabitants of Xinjiang province? No. But have they been there for more than 1,000 years? Yes. They were there in that region before China claimed that area. And I think that's the important thing to remember, right? So modern day China is big, and ancient China at that time was really only this area. Here, let me turn this border off. This right here, this chunk right here was really all that China controlled during this period of time. The Tang Dynasty was kind of falling apart, and they really only had this right here. Historically speaking, this whole area was not China, and China didn't consider these people Chinese. This was the Kingdom of Tibet, or the Empire of Tibet. This region up here was part of various Turkish territories, the Go Turks or the Xianbei, or the Xianbei weren't Turkic, by the way. That could have been construed poorly. Xianbei were older than the Turkic people, historically speaking. These were Mongolian people, or Kyrgyz, or Uighur, or Uighur, if we go way back into like the BC time period. This region right here was not considered Chinese. This region right here, this is the sort of important junction of the Silk Road. This is the Tarim Basin. This was not historically considered Chinese. Historically speaking, most places were not China. That's accurate, Cave. That's accurate. Historically speaking, China was this region. And it really only got out of that region in the last 150, 200 years. So the stuff that Mao pushed out during his reign, and especially during the Cultural Revolution, where they literally rewrote history in China to claim that all of these peoples were always in Chinese orbit, that is a falsehood. The Chinese government lies, which is why I'm probably not welcome there. I don't know if I'm actually welcome there or not, but, you know. Have you ever heard of historians being bribed to express a certain point of view of history? Yes, and it happens probably more than you would like for it to think about. I'll give you a really clear example. All right, so if you know anything about Egyptian history, you may have heard the name Zahi Hawass. Zahi Hawass was the official Egyptian head of archaeology for 30-ish, maybe 40 years. If you wanted to excavate in Egypt, or if you wanted to publish anything about Egyptian history, you pretty much had to suck up to that guy. Because he had a version of Egyptian history, and he's not dead, he has a version of Egyptian history that is the one that he wants to protect, and he's very, very protective of it. And people that have different opinions from his don't always get their stuff published or supported or expressed. But history, as an organized field, has been just like any other field. There are people that are going to be in a position to be bought. And I haven't forgotten about what's in the news. I'll talk about that in just a bit. I kind of got wound up here for a second. But it's not just like one area. There are a lot of people in any area that are willing to be bought or bribed. There's a lot of pressure on a lot of people to fit into narratives, which is why I don't really fit in a lot with... Like, I've got people that I consider really close friends, people that have been mentors to me, people that have taught me a lot. Aristotle. Philosophy. Hey, everybody. Welcome in. Tommy, how's it going? Lumpy, Noger, gentlemen, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Jameson Mailmain, what up, what up? Navel gazing. Infernal is here. Wow, the whole party. Say thank you to Eris. Thank you, Eris. You are an amazing streamer, and if you're not following Aristotle, you should. And everybody that came in with Aristotle, if you don't know who I am, hello, my name is Shane. I'm a college teacher. I teach history and sociology. And we talk about history on my chat. And tonight we're talking about, in part, the Uighurs. Dun 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 dun. Doing the Miserable. Thank you so much for that follow. And welcome to the adventure. Last time I got before you could get over here. So tonight we were talking about the Korean Peninsula and Northern Asian history. Dun dun dun. Dun 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 dun. Jameson Mailmain. Thank you for that follow. And welcome to the adventure. You just want to say that the name Aristotle is an amazing name? I agree. If you don't know who I am, again, I'm Shane. I teach history at college for a living, and we talk history here on stream. And we get off on tangents and stuff, and we goof off and have a good time. This is not college history. This is not a lecture. I like to call them guided discussions instead of lectures, because we'll go off on tangents. And like right now, we're talking about how history can be politicized and how individual historians can be sort of bought, if you want to say it that way, or bribed. You don't even have a lectern to talk from, right? Eris was calling me James, finally James. And finally someone talked to me by my real name. Jameson Mailmain. I gotcha. So then why doesn't the Chinese Communist Party simply bribe all the world historians about the whole Uyghur issue? Uh, because not everybody's willing to be bought. You know, like some people still have integrity. Some people don't. Uh, Not everybody like, and see, China is actually backfiring about a lot of this stuff. Um, China has super slash uber politicized their archaeology and history since the 70s. And it has become increasingly difficult for people that aren't Chinese to do archaeology or anthropology or even like genetic research in China because they are super over the top about controlling everything that gets published about China, right? Because they want to control the narrative, right? If I went to China and I excavated something that proved the official government narrative wrong, they would threaten me with lawsuits if I publish something without their approval. You have to sign disclosure agreements to do a lot of the stuff over in China. And a lot of people don't even want to go over there anymore because of that crap, right? You know, like a lot of people just, I wouldn't want to go do that, right? If you told me we have final publishing control over anything that you find, regardless, and I knew that China had a particular narrative of history that they wanted to promote, which they do, I wouldn't sign that. I wouldn't go over there and do that. I would go somewhere else. And this is why increasingly all of the stuff that's being done in China is being done much, much more by Chinese archaeologists. And anything that gets published out of Chinese archaeology, I hold really high levels of skepticism against that. Now there have been some times where they brought in some French people, some from French universities. I'll tend to look at that more than I would just something being published straight by archaeological people from China or anthropological people from China. But like China claims all kinds of crap. Like there's been this claim going on that they found this cave that's got human remains that are, 95,000 years old, but they won't let anybody else look at them. And that completely upends the entire concept of our established migratory patterns because they're basically trying to say that people were doing civilization in China before they were doing it anywhere else, which is observably incorrect, right? But, it's the way that it goes. I'm getting a little bit wound up. Let me catch up with chat. I apologize. Let me say hello to everybody. Noger, how's it going, man? Good to see you. I'll give some shout outs along the way. Go follow all of these people because if you don't, it will make me sad. Lumpy, how's it going? I hope that you're having a good one. I hope that you are feeling better. I know that you were pretty tired the other night on Tuesday and had a lot of stuff going on at work. I hope that has calmed down for you. Tommy, what's up? Good to see you. Said hey to Jameson. Vipers, what's up, my friend? How are you? Infernal is another sociologist and plays games and is incredibly fun to talk with. You should go follow her. So if I told him Ptolemy was a Macedonian and not an Egyptian, he would cut me. Probably not. That one's very basic. Like everybody knows that one. He's not that dumb. Everybody knows that the Ptolemaic Empire was run by people that were originally Macedonians. Now, of course, they married into local people eventually, and by the time you get to like Ptolemy the Fifth, they had really started embracing a lot of the local stuff. But that's mostly because they ran out of mercenaries that they could buy from Greece. Broken Toilet Seat, what's up, my friend? How's it going? Somebody was literally asking about that in Eris's stream. Vipers, the context has been lost. Fill me back in on that and we'll come back around to it. You don't really need everyone to agree. You just need enough to create the fog. Yeah, pretty much. Everybody makes mistakes. Some random kid called you Jade. Oh, and Jam. Well, there we go. Jam Isan. I guess it could work. And then everyone who says that, I don't know, maybe slavery is bad. It's hurting the people of the Chinese people. It's hurting the feelings of the Chinese people. Slavery is bad. And if that hurts the Chinese government's feelings, I won't apologize for that. The Chinese government is a human rights abuser and should be labeled as a human rights abuser and should be held responsible for that. Don't all nations do that same thing to embellish their history? To a certain extent, yes. But that's why peer review is an important thing. That's also why publishing archaeological finds is important, and publishing site survey material is important. In a factual thing, not an interpretive thing. So, like, if you go do a dig, it's really important that you just publish everything that you find just factual. Like, here's what we dug up. Here's where it was. Here's what it looks like. And you don't try to add stuff on top of it. You just say, here's the stuff, and then let everybody else look at it and come to a consensus. You would have to get tea with the police. Probably so. Still better than North Korea discovering the unicorn? Yeah, exactly, right? Like, they discovered the tomb of Hyungsa and found a unicorn inside of it because he was descended from the unicorns and rode a unicorn, right? It is getting sorted out. Good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Don't they teach that they evolved from some different species or something? The Chinese government, I haven't heard that. There is a version of what we would call like genetic purity or scientific racism that they promote that sort of says Han Chinese is the best way to be. But I don't necessarily know whether or not they say that they come from a different species. I don't know enough to comment on that one way or the other. You had some serious talks with the admins about your situation. Excellent. Long story short, it's all under control. Excellent. Tomorrow, you will get a top hat to stream a cartoony British sim-esque... Okay. About the political rewriting of history. Let me roll back up to see what you were even saying. Oh, okay, cool. Well, Eris, if you're still around and you want to bring that back up, let me know. Hurting the feelings of Chinese people is a phrase that the CCP absolutely loves to publish in international press releases. Yeah, well, it's because they're snowflakes. Jinping Xi, you are a snowflake. I think it's supposed to imply that other countries are just being racist or something. If the Nazis thought it was cool, the CCP has adopted it and recycled it. It wasn't a question. It was a question from a viewer. Okay. And you referred them to my stream. Oh, cool. Well, viewer, if you were asking about that in Eris' stream and now you're in my stream, you're welcome to ask that question. So there we go. And yet some say that the Han ethnic group could disappear if they keep not making babies. About 20 minutes ago, Tuna redeemed What's in the News. That's one thing that's in the news. For the first time since the 60s, the Chinese population went down last year. That's a big deal. Don't say that about Xi. He will claim his human rights have been violated and take me to the UN and sue me. Okay, well, whatever. UN doesn't actually hear lawsuits, but he's got no claim there. I could always just say that I'm parodying. You don't know if anything that I'm saying is true. I could be playing a role right now. I could have made up this entire persona. UN, sue this random streamer. Yeah, exactly. What's more likely to happen is that I'll never be allowed into China. And that does kind of suck because there's a lot of cool stuff. But honestly, I wouldn't go over there anyway. I would go to Iran before I went to China. And I'm not even joking. Like right now, if you said you have to go to a really dangerous country, I would go to Iran before I went to China. I would. Who knows? Maybe the government will collapse one day. Probably. I mean, everything. No government is eternal. That's a lie that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel good when we go to bed. History tells us that nothing is eternal, and we're not even old. Like, none of the countries today are even really that old. America's not even 300 yet, right? America isn't even as old as the Roman Republic, and the Roman Republic wasn't even as long as the Roman Empire. So we're not that old. We're not that old. You've been there, you'll never go again. Sounds legit if you stick to the parody law. What's up, Tendaria? It's good to see you again. She is a subscriber and will unsubscribe. Well, I'll miss that $2.50. Alas. Don't worry, no Chinese people are Tiananmen Square Massacre. Yeah, and there we go. Vipers has just ensured that no Chinese people will ever be able to watch the VOD for this stream. Tiananmen Massacre in 15th of April 1989. Yeah. It takes one charismatic dude to mess up a whole country. It can, Nixa. It really can. America is... Oh, Vipers. That's a good one. America isn't even as old as your mom. That's great. 5 countries that are super corrupt that I wouldn't go to. I wouldn't go to Russia, even though I'd really like to. There's cool history there. I wouldn't go to China, even though I'd really like to. There's cool history there. I would not go to Syria right now. That's a cool country with a lot of cool history, but I would never go there. I've got to find 2 more. Never go. Never go. That's tough. That's really tough because some places have the potential to calm down. Like, I would want to say, like, Lebanon, right? Like, oh, I'd love to go to Lebanon. There's a place there called Baalbek, and it has this pillar, this big obelisk. It's the largest individual cut stone that humans have ever made. It is the largest individual cut stone that humans have ever made. It's a single piece obelisk, and it's lying on its side at this place called Baalbek. But Lebanon is safe to travel to sometimes, right? Lebanon's safe to travel to sometimes. Is China dangerous for Western tourists? Nintendo, I would say yes. If you want to go, go. You do your thing. I wouldn't go. The only old country is China, which is 5,000 years old. But even that isn't the same country. Those borders have shifted and those governments have changed so many times. The modern state of China is maybe 700 years old. Maybe. Like, if we look at the expulsion of the Yuan dynasty, which was Kublai Khan, so Genghis Khan's grandson. So if we looked at when they ran out the Yuan dynasty and reestablished Chinese control over China, you might say that they are that old. So maybe they're 700 years old. But I don't think we can count that, and because it's not unbroken, right? Sudan. See, I actually thought about saying Sudan, Lumpy, but the thing is, the northern part of Sudan is not where most of the violence is. So Sudan is a dangerous country. Yes, there are lots of places where you would not want to be. You do not want to be in this little pocket of territory right here because it's contested between North and South Sudan and there's active fighting. You do not want to be on this border over here between Sudan and Chad because that's where there's a lot of terrorist activity and fighting, and you don't want to go over there. But the stuff that I would want to go see, like, you could fly over here into N'Djamena, or not N'Djamena, Khartoum. You could fly over here into Khartoum and just go up the Nile to the ancient sites of Meroe, and that's so touristy that nobody messes with it. So I don't want to say that I would never go to Sudan, because I could foresee even something in like the next 2 or 3 years that Sudan calms down enough that I would feel comfortable going over there. If I was going by myself and I wasn't married, I would go now. I am married, and I wouldn't want to go by myself, so that's what's keeping me away from there. North Korea, yeah. So there's number 4, Moose. I would never go to North Korea. Venezuela, I can see a period of time where Venezuela calms down. I know it won't be in the next few years, but in my lifetime, I could see a period of time where Venezuela would calm down and I could go there. Djibouti, I don't see. Djibouti's rough. Like right now, there's a lot of stuff going on over here, and it's pretty messed up. But a lot of that comes from the fact that the Tigray rebels up in the northern part of Ethiopia are causing a lot of trouble. But that's calming down too, and I could see Djibouti calming down in maybe 10 years. So like I don't know if that's on there. China is 99% not dangerous for Western tourists, but you're the unlucky otherwise. Yeah, exactly. Canada, you don't trust them. Belarus, if Lukashenko ever got out of power, Belarus would be fine. Lukashenko is the issue with Belarus. The vast majority of the Belarusian people, including some of the power structure, are not Lukashenko. That guy is a giant turd. He's the issue with them. America, you'll probably get shot. Lebanon is beautiful but scary. I feel like you're on the edge of something bad all the time. Yeah, see, that's the thing, Meg. Like, there's stuff there. They have a tourist market. They try to keep all that stuff safe. I could see Lebanon being calm, like in the next couple of years, especially if, well, I mean, if the Netanyahu thing ever falls out, that would be positive. You know, they don't really care for him very much. You've made many business trips to China, but these days you won't go to China. You're too worried that will jail you for some political retaliation. Right. You'd argue that China is 67 years old. Junk, there's a fair argument to be made for that, right? Like, they have only been a country since the end of World War II. Or even the end of Mao, right? I'll give you either one of those as a completely legitimate particular issue. Yemen or Oman? I would not go to Yemen right now. I could see going to Yemen in the future. I could see going to Oman right now. Like, you could go to Oman right now. I don't know if I would go with my wife. But if I was going with another guy, I don't think that would be that big of an issue. Papua New Guinea, it's okay. Afghanistan, okay, so that's got to be the 5th. Afghanistan, I don't see myself ever being able to go there. And there's so much cool history in Afghanistan. Oh my gosh, there's so much cool history in Afghanistan. Up here in these mountains, there are some really big forts that were built by the Sultanate of Delhi to try to block out the Mongol invasions. And there's just these enormous castles that are on the borders of some of these mountain passes. Man, that would be amazing to go see, and you just can't do it. Ukraine in a few years. Obi-Wan Kenobi, I hope that Ukraine in a few years is booming with tourist industry, because they have kicked Russia's butt out and they've rebuilt their economy, and people want to go there because they're an involved member of the European Union, and they have rebuilt from the senseless invasion that Putin is perpetrating. Haiti, you could go to Haiti right now. Haiti is rough, but you could go to Haiti right now. I don't have a problem with that. Money is the tranquilizer of wars and conflict. That's cool. I agree. Lumpy's going to bed. Lumpy, take it easy, my friend. Hope you have a good night. You'll not travel to a country where you can't drink. That's fair. That's fair. Whose wife would go with you if not your own? That's a fair question too, Meg. I wasn't saying that I wouldn't go with someone else's wife. I would say that I would not bring my wife to Oman with me. There's only one place I won't go. It's outside. Jersey on a Saturday night. That's fair. I wouldn't mind Jersey on a Saturday night. There are parts of Jersey that's not so bad. I want to go to a country where you're not allowed to watch a football match. That's fair too. It's not like Haiti's government is going to stop you. That's true. Haiti, after the presidential assassination, is basically a gang running the country, and kidnapping is really bad. It is. The After that last big thing where Haiti kidnapped all of the kids, there was a sort of understanding that that was not going to happen again. So while kidnapping is bad of Haitian people, you haven't seen a lot of reports of Americans getting kidnapped again. The Haitian government doesn't want to bring the ire of America on them. Nothing wrong with Nigeria. Well, I mean, there are problems that Nigeria face. Startling amounts of wealth inequality. So Nigeria is a country that is on the cusp of something amazing. It's one of the largest countries in Africa. Come here. Get in the center. Thank you. It's one of the largest countries in Africa. It has one of the largest populations of any country in Africa. It has a burgeoning technology sector. It has a burgeoning technological communication sector. There are some fairly good universities in Nigeria. Their education system, if you can get into it, is not that bad. It's massively disproportionate towards men. It's incredibly corrupt to get into college because they don't have a lot of positions. So it's about who can bribe into admission and stuff like that. But once you get there, they're not actually that bad. The government system is fairly frail, but they are a functioning democracy. The last time they had elections, they had international poll watchers go there, and they found some irregularities, but this isn't like super crazy corrupt. They have a mostly functioning democracy in Nigeria. They have a lot of natural resources in Nigeria. They are on the edge of being an African power. If they could collectively get like one ring up or one rung further up the ladder, they are an emerging power. I could see a scenario, and I'm not saying that this is definitely going to happen, but I could see a series of events in a scenario where in 20 years, Nigeria is the wealthiest country in Africa. More so than South Africa, more so than Egypt or even Libya with all of its oil reserves. Nigeria is on the edge of something. Their problem is that they have too many princes who left money in unclaimable bank accounts, right? All right. My adventure hat has been summoned. I still need to talk about what's in the news, and I have something specific that I want to talk about. So let me say this. I'm going to do the opinion hat, and I'm going to do what's in the news, and then we have to raid, because otherwise I'm getting wound up, and I might sit here for another hour just talking, and I don't want to do that because I've still got to teach 3 hours tomorrow. I have a budget of $2,000 for 2 people. Where would I go on vacation? $2,000 for 2 people. It depends. Is the other person my wife? You have to clarify for me, Aristotle. Is the other person my wife? Am I going with Brittany, or am I going with a friend? Like, am I taking you somewhere? Like, you say, hey, take me on a trip. Okay, so me and my wife. Where are we going to go for $2,000? So this is like total. Like, we can't go over that at all, or is it just $2,000 to get there? We'll just say $2,000 total. Where are we going to go? Somewhere to go with my wife. Does it have to be out of the country? No, you can't get to Ireland for 2,000. Um, you can't get to Ireland. I don't know if you can fly to Ireland on just a budget of 2,000 right now. If you're maybe flying like crappy airlines, you might be able to fly there for $2,000, but then you couldn't stay for more than a day. Puerto Rico, and you can stay in my house. That's not a bad idea. I was thinking about Belize for several reasons. If I'm traveling with my wife, one of the things that my wife doesn't really like is going to places with really big time changes. So Belize is actually in the same time zone as I am. So we could get there for cheap. And I know that we could get there for cheap because I've looked at this. You can get a round trip ticket to Belize from where I'm at for about $500. So if we both got tickets for about $500, that would leave us $1,000 to spend time in Belize. And Belize has got cool stuff in it. Number one, my wife really likes, we both like this, but my wife really likes hiking and being outside, and we both like bird watching. And Belize has an amazing amount of places that are untouched, absolute, like, pristine rainforest stuff where you can go do lots of really cool tropical bird watching and hike around and stuff. Belize also has really cool ancient ruins, specifically Mayan ruins. So that would be wicked cool for me. I think we would go to Belize. Also, they speak English, so that helps. And you can use American dollars at a lot of places in Belize, so that also helps. So I think Belize would be the place to go for if we just had $2,000 and we're trying to leave the country. $2,000 would get you 4 or 5 days in Belize pretty comfortably. Everyone I know that has been to Belize has loved it. Yeah, it's a cool place. I've wanted to go down there for years. I thought it doesn't include flights. You can't really account for those reliably. That's true. I gotten a $300 flight to the UK before, but it took 13 months to advance. Yeah. Cartagena. Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, I'd love to go to Spain. That'd be really cool. I'd love to go over there. Belize is awesome. Checking Skyscanner, and I'm like, how do the heck do you spell Mississippi? Jackson to Dublin. Yeah, I'm telling you, Viper. I know this because I watched. Oh, Cartagena, Colombia. Colombia would be really cool to go to. There's some neat stuff down there. There's some Neolithic stuff. Some cave shelters that are down in Colombia that I would love to go see. There's some cave paintings in Colombia that I would love to go see. And my wife would appreciate that because a lot of them are pretty long hikes into the jungle. Also cool languages, Belizean, Creole, and Garifuna. Yeah. I keep an eyeball on stuff. I tend to know how much it is to travel because one of the things that I do because I can't because I can't travel is as I think about traveling, and I go, how far away? How far could I get on this? Money exchange will be a stretch for those 2,000. Yeah. Jungle hiking, indeed. Not that we're going to go take over somebody. All right, so there's that. Tuna asked what's in the news. I mentioned the birth rate in China, but specifically to answer the what's in the news thing, I want to talk a little bit about Jacinda Ardern, who is currently the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She announced yesterday that she is going to step down from the position of Prime Minister. And this was kind of a big shock. So Jacinda Ardern was the youngest female head of state when she got inaugurated. She's only been in power for, at this point, about 5 or 6 years. I think she got inaugurated she got elected in 2018. She took power in 2019. So she's been in charge for like 5 years. And she's given up politics pretty much altogether if we sort of read between the lines of what she's saying. And this was a big shock. If you look at the popularity polls, she was really popular in New Zealand. But there were a lot of people in New Zealand. There was a very vocal minority in New Zealand that basically decided to make her life a living hell. And I want to comment on how well Jacinda Ardern handled things like the COVID-19 pandemic. New Zealand for a long time was basically COVID free. They had an incredibly good response, but her response was seen as dictatorial and tyrannical. A lot of people hated the way that she did things, and she started getting massive amounts of death threats. And I mention her because it was a big shock that she's resigning, but to also bring up the fact that the world just treats women leaders differently, and it treats women politicians differently. There were so many horrible things about the way that people in New Zealand treated Jacinda Ardern. If you look at study after study, it is shown, statistically speaking, and you can go pull up publications on this stuff, that the negative response to female heads of state and female government members are disproportionately negative compared to men. And if you start doing intersectionality and you talk about like black government members or heads of state, or Latina people or Asian people, that gets even further jacked in the demographics. Right, like Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? In the broad scale of things, she is not a powerful politician because she's a junior member of the House of Representatives, but she gets disproportionately negative coverage because she talks a lot and she's on the news a lot and she is very active on social media, but the response to her is massively negative, right? Republicans that were running for office in places like Idaho were using the shadowy threat of Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez as a way to fund their campaigns, right? But why? Because she's a woman, she's in a position of power, and she's not white, right? So as a world, do better, right? We have just piles of friggin' data that shows that women are just as intellectually capable as men. So why in the heck do they get disproportionately called stupid and incompetent? We have loads of data that show that they make cognitive decisions just as efficiently as men, yet they get called idiots all the time. They get sexualized more frequently than male politicians do. The threats against them are much more vile and frequently include things like rape, way more frequently than a threat against a male politician. It's just disgusting, right? So world, do better, right? Jacinda Ardern said she said that she wasn't quitting because of the threats, but you've got to know that had an impact on her decision, right? Some of the stuff that people wrote about her was utterly vile, and it's disgusting, right? So just don't do that. And if you see people doing that, you know, you gotta talk about that. I don't know about idiots. I remember Trump being called an idiot every day. Well, sure, but that's one example compared to how many times do we see that about any woman politician, right? And Trump is a bit of a special case because, I don't know, he was such an odd example of a head of state
I don't know if he applies to a lot of the same metrics as previous heads of state. The situations that brought him into presidency and the way that he handled the presidency opened him up to a lot of criticism. Specifically, and this isn't like, all right, I'm not calling Trump an idiot. However, Trump clearly did not understand basic functions of the government, right? Like, he pretty clearly just did not understand how things worked and how things should work, right? And that opened him up to a lot of criticism, like, oh, he's president and doesn't understand what the Constitution says. That makes him an idiot, right? I'm not saying that every president has memorized the Constitution, but if you compare him to, for example, President Obama, the president before him, he's not even in the same kind of world, right? He didn't fit in the same box as a lot of other stuff, and that made him more of a target than a lot of other things, than a lot of other previous presidents. So anyway, yeah, look at how frequently people call Marjorie Taylor Greene an idiot, right? So like every time someone breathes about Marjorie Taylor Greene that's not a Republican, they're calling her an idiot, right? Now, to be fair, Marjorie Taylor Greene did seem to support the idea that Jewish people had built lasers on the moon. So that is an idiotic idea. She also got really deep in the QAnon stuff, which is idiotic. Now, she did a big publicity tour and tried to walk back a whole lot of the QAnon stuff. A lot of people have said that whole thing was so that she could get onto committee assignments. This is also a lot of the reasons why people said that she had been very anti-Kevin McCarthy until the vote came down, and that she was very pro-Kevin McCarthy because she wanted Kevin McCarthy to put her on committees. And it turns out that she gets put on the Homeland Security Committee, which is a pretty important one. So did she actually walk back any of that stuff, or was that all just a publicity stunt? I don't know. You can say whatever you want to about it. So right now there's mold growing underneath your fridge that's more capable of being head of state than Trump. I don't actually, I mean, I know what you're saying, but like I don't think so, because mold doesn't have any sort of cognitive processes. And I'll say this, like, there are things that Trump did that I agree with, that I like. I didn't vote for him, and I won't vote for him next time, and I hope that he loses. I don't like him as a person. I don't think that he's a good leader. I don't personally think that he's a very good person. But I don't disagree with a lot of the stuff that he did. Cracking down on intellectual property theft from China is a good thing. China steals billions of dollars worth of corporate secrets from companies in America every year, and I think we should stop that and go on the offensive to stop that. And that's a Trump policy. I don't have any problem with that at all, right? So like, it's not like he did everything wrong. He did a lot of stuff wrong, and he did a lot of stuff that I don't agree with. But that doesn't mean that he's not a slime mold, right? So I know that puts me in a weird spot. I'm not trying to defend Trump, but he's not a slime mold. All right, let's go do a raid because it is time, and I need to stop talking, because otherwise I'm going to blow my voice out, and I'm not going to be able to teach for 3 hours tomorrow. But there's been good chat tonight, and I appreciate that. Let us go do a raid to. They aren't going to learn anyway. This sucks. I have to go on Twitter and get Shane canceled. I mean, if you want me to say that Trump is an idiot, I kind of think that Trump is an idiot, right? I'm not pro-Trump. I will defend the things that he did that I think are accurate. I like the fact that he initially started talking about decriminalizing marijuana. Now, he didn't do it, right? But I liked that as an idea. I thought that was a fine concept. I wish he would have followed through with that. I don't like the people that he picked for the Supreme Court, though, right? So I'm not like in his camp, but there are things that he said that I agree with. And I think that, yeah, I know what everybody's saying, right? But we do have to remember that if we lump a person as an entire unit into one box, that then forces us to argue against everything that person is. And that is an easy thing to do because it requires less honesty sometimes, because honesty is kind of hard. And it also means that we have to maybe argue against some things that are good. And, face it, you'll ask some kid what branch of Buddhism they followed again and try, I didn't mean to traumatize that kid, but they walked up and they said, "Hey, I'm a Buddhist." And I'm like, "Oh, cool, really?" And I tried to get involved, and it just turned out not to be what they were after. Trump got handled so easy by the Chinese. He canceled the TPP and said he could organize a better unilateral trade deal. That's what was. Well, yeah, the trade deals that he set up in China were to try to go around China were not so great. But I will say this: the Trump administration got Morocco and the UAE to normalize relationships with Israel with the Abraham Accords. That's a great deal. That is a great thing. Those are Arab nations who previously had stated that Israel has no right to exist, that now have open and working trade relationships and ambassadorial relationships with Israel. That's a positive. I don't care what anybody says. That's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. I don't know if that was his plan or if that was his policy or if he came up with that, but his administration made that happen, right? So he gets credit for some of that. Again, I mean, he's not what I would consider a good person. But there's some stuff that came out of his policies that I agree with. So I'm okay with saying that. I know that it's not popular. I know it looks like I'm a Trump apologist, but I'll take the lumps for it because I think it's factually accurate. Countries that previously wanted to kill everybody in Israel that don't want to kill everybody in Israel anymore, that's a positive, right? I noticed that not many people are pushing back against that idea. You still vote for the slime mold, and that's fair. Everybody gets the right to vote for whoever they want to. I think it's time to dump that Trump lemonade in the fridge. I said I wouldn't vote for him. I didn't vote for him. I don't envision any scenario that I would vote for him. And again, I don't want him to be president again. But that doesn't mean I think that everything he did was wrong. And if that makes me a Kool-Aid drinker, so be it. I'll hold to my convictions. Let's go raid Tony. Tony is an amazing artist. I have Tony Moy's artwork on the wall in the room right behind me. He is a guy that's really interested in history. He's actually working on a comic book that follows a particular unit in World War II that is really, really interesting. So let's go raid Tony. And when we get there, as always, we will yell adventure. And if you have those lovely adventure hat emotes, throw those in the chat. Until next time, which will maybe be this weekend. I hope I can get around to do some Gundam stuff. You can see the Gundam that I'm working on right here, this big old boy. But next time we'll have a definite stream is on Tuesday. We'll be doing a viewer request stream on the Iranian Revolution, which is going to be, I think, a good one. So until then, I'll see everybody around, and have a good night, and see you next time.